So now we've seen how we can get data from the database using the get method, and we've also seen how we can add new documents to the database using the add method. I want to show you a third thing we can do, and that is to delete documents. So what I'd like to do is output some kind of little button in each one of these li tags, and when we click on that button, it's going to delete that document from the database. So first of all, we need to come over to our template that we output for each recipe, and we want to create a button for each one that we can click on. So let me create this button tag first of all. Inside, I'm going to say delete, and we're also going to add a few Bootstrap classes just to make this look a bit better. The first one is BTN to make it look like a button, then BTN-danger, that colors it red, then BTN-SM, and also MY-2 to give it margin in the Y direction of 2. So if I save this now, we should see those in the template. And when I click on these, I want to get that recipe and delete it from the database. So how am I going to do this? Well, first of all, we need to attach some kind of event listener to these buttons. Now, to attach a different listener to each button, that would be quite costly, especially if we have a lot of different recipes, because we're attaching a lot of events over and over again. Instead, what I'm going to do is use event delegation. So we'll just attach one event listener to the whole UL, the whole list, and then when we click on that, we'll check to see if we've clicked on a button. If we have, then we'll go about deleting that recipe. All right, so let's go down here and create another comment which says deleting data, and then under that we'll grab the list, which we already have a reference to. That's the UL right here. So we're attaching an event listener to that list. So we'll say add event listener, and the event we want to listen for is a click event. Now we do need to take in the event object as a parameter to this callback function, because we need to ultimately check the target. So what I'm going to do is console.log e for now, just so we can see every time we click somewhere what happens. So if I click over here, just anywhere in the UL, we can see we get this logged to the console. And if we scroll down to the target property, which is down here somewhere, we can see that this is the LI. So I just clicked anywhere in the LI. Now, if I click on one of the buttons, if I expand this, then go down to target, I can see that the target was in fact the button. So what I'm going to do is check inside here to see if the target was a button, because that's when we want to delete something. So let's do that. I'll say if, then e.target, then .tag name, and I'm going to see if that is triple equals to button. So if the tag that we click on is a button, then we're going to do something. If it's not, we're not going to do anything. So what do we need to do here? We need to delete that recipe. But how do we know what recipe we actually want to delete? Because all we've got here is the title and the timestamp. Now, based on that, we can't go out and query the DOM and say, okay, delete something with this title, because there might be multiple things with that title or multiple things with this timestamp. Instead, what we'd like to do is make use of these unique IDs on each document. So whenever we create a new document in Firestore, it automatically assigns it this unique ID, and no two are the same. So if we have access to these on the front end, then we could say, okay, we'll use this ID to go out and delete that recipe. So first of all, we need to somehow store the ID in each li tag. How are we going to do that? Well, all we're going to do is grab this ID when we first receive the data back. So when we get each document right here, we also get access to the ID on that document, and I can demo that by logging it to the console. I'm going to say, oops, and this needs to be in lowercase, not capitals, console.log, and then doc.id, and we use the ID property on the doc to get that. So let's save it and have a look, and now we can see each one of these IDs. So what we could do is pass this ID right here as a second argument into the add recipe function. So if I do that, we can take it as a parameter up here in the add recipe function. We'll take the ID for each recipe as well, and then we can output it inside the li tag somehow. So what I'm going to do is use a data-id attribute. So I'm going to set that equal to this thing right here, and that is $curly braces ID. So this attribute right here, you can call whatever you want. It starts with data. That's how we do it in HTML, custom data attributes, then hyphen, then whatever attribute name you want. I'm calling it ID because that is logical to do so. So if we save this now, for each recipe, we should see the ID of that recipe inside this attribute. So let me save it and inspect one of these. And if we go to the Elements tab, we can see each LI now has one of these data ID attributes with the ID of that document that's stored in the database. So now when we click on one of these buttons, what we could do is traverse up the DOM to the parent, find the ID, and then what we could do is query the database for that document with the ID and delete it. And that is exactly what we're going to do. So let's go back down here where we check if the tag name is a button when we first click something. This is the point that we want to get the ID. So let's say the const ID is going to be equal to the e.target, which is the button that we clicked on. Then what we want to do is get the parent element, which is going to be the li tag. So if I click this button right here, it will get this li. If I click this button, it will get this li, etc. So let's do that. We'll say dot parent element. And then from that, we want to get an attribute because we want that data ID attribute. So we'll say data hyphen ID. And we need to surround this in parentheses like so. So now we have the ID of the recipe that we ultimately want to delete. I'm going to just log this to the console so we can see it. Console.log ID, save. Then when we click on a delete button, we can see the ID that we want to delete. And for each button, we're getting a different one. And that marries up to whatever document we want to delete right here. So now we have the ID, how do we reach out to this collection and delete a document? Well, first of all, we need to say db down here, .collection, to get a reference to that collection. So we'll say db.collection and pass in an argument, which is recipes, the collection that we want. Then we want to get a reference to a single document. Now we do that by using the doc method. So .doc, like so. And as an argument, we pass in the ID that we want a reference to. So if I pass in this ID right here, then what it's going to do is get a reference to whatever document has that ID that we click on over here. So now we have that reference to the ID, the document that we click. What we can do is use a method on this called delete to delete that document. Now again, this is asynchronous. It takes some time to complete and it returns a promise. So when it's done, we can fire the function inside the then method. And inside here, we'll just say console.log and we'll just say recipe deleted. Just so we know. All right, let's save this, cross our fingers, hope it works, and try to delete something. So I'm just going to refresh to make sure we catch all those changes. Then I'm going to delete the top one, which is vegan pie. So we can see now a recipe deleted. And if we come over to the database, now we see 3. And if we cycle through these, we can no longer see the vegan pie. Now, again, the change doesn't automatically show here because we get the documents when the page first loads, and we've deleted something after the page loads. We'd have to currently refresh to see that change. But it still works. This whole functionality of deleting something from the database is still working. So just really quickly again, we're clicking on a delete button, and that is firing this event right here because we're attaching this to the UL. Then we're checking if the tag is a button. Then we're getting the ID from the parent of that tag, which is the li tag. Remember, we attach that ID inside this thing over here, which we got back down here. So we're getting the ID, and then we're getting a reference to the recipes collection, a single document with the ID, then we're deleting it. So that's the 3 main things now that we can do with the database that I've shown you. We can get data, we can add data, and we can delete data. But again, when we do these things, it's not automatically updating in the browser, and that functionality would be nice. And to do that, we're going to have to explore real-time listeners. So we'll do that in the next lecture.